So peptides, the word itself just means a small chain of amino acids. But we're talking about something very specific when we talk about peptides in this context. And our body makes a number of peptides that are chemical messengers that enhance some kind of pathway in the body. That might be related to body composition. It might be related to inflammation and injury, healing. It might be related to brain health, energy, mood. So there are peptides that govern all sorts of reactions in our bodies.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friend, welcome back to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm Jenn Trepeck, your host and health coach, here with you every week for wellness without the weirdness. And I think few things are talked about more than peptides these days. And they're typically named in some combination of letters and numbers. So when people hear about them, it's like a game that I think is both confusing and mesmerizing because the people talking about them, especially online, talk about them as this miracle, magical, easy button for whatever their health goal or challenge is and whatever health goal or challenge you have. So to help us all better understand them, decide if they're a fit for us personally, and how to use them effectively, I have a wonderful expert joining us today. Originally from Poland and raised in the United States, she's a dedicated medical professional focused on advancing healthcare. She graduated with top honors from the University of Maryland School of Medicine and completed her residency in academic emergency medicine at the George Washington University. Her special interests include sustainable weight loss, balanced hormone health, and longevity. She emphasizes the importance of lifestyle adjustments to optimize patients' biology, promoting health, vitality, and long-term wellness. Inspired by her experiences in emergency medicine, working with the communities facing health challenges, she shifted her focus to proactive, comprehensive healthcare. Establishing her private practice allows her to offer personalized care and empower individuals to lead healthier lives by intervening before illness takes hold. Amen. Driven by her lifelong goal, she's enthusiastic about sharing her expertise and dedication to contribute to a healthier future for her community. Please help me welcome Dr. Aleksandra Gajer.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, absolutely. It's official. I feel like our last conversation was ages ago. So we'll start with your story and then go from there with our focus on peptides today. So super quick, we just have one more piece of housekeeping. So we'll tell our members what they're getting this week. So friends, join us in the Happy Healthy Hub. Being a member of the Hub is the next best thing to working with me as your health coach. You get a recipe each week delivered to your inbox, curated articles, additional discounts from me and our partners, interview episodes like this one in full video, including some behind the scenes content, access to the community board where we can interact, ask and answer questions, and so much more. All of this, by the way, is yours for just $12 a month, or you could prepay a year and you get 2 months free. So a year for $120. What a bargain. So your recipe this week is for grilled steak salad with corn, cucumbers, and sweet onion dressing. The dressing and the veggies are perfect for summer, and this is really not difficult to make, even though it sounds like it's a lot. It's definitely not. It's also a great one if you had a barbecue or you grilled and you have leftover steak, make this one. So to get this recipe, plus this episode in full video, access to our community chat where you can ask me anything, go to asaladwithasideoffries.com/membership. From there, you'll click subscribe now, follow the prompts to enter your payment info, and create your login to access the hub and all of your benefits. Remember, you're going to asaladwithasideoffries.com/membership. This supports your health and this show, so we can continue to do this together every week. Okay, Aleksandra, tell us your story, because what made you go from emergency medicine to this personalized care, for health span?
Yeah, great question. So my education was in conventional medicine. I did my MD at University of Maryland, like you talked about. And And I went into emergency medicine for several reasons. I really like being kind of at ground zero, solving people's problems and being a real part of the mess and people's lives in that way. And I got to do some very cool things. I got to save lives and be involved in a way that I really wanted to, but it did not feel like exactly where I wanted to be. And I found that a lot of the people that I was seeing were dealing with chronic illnesses and they were coming back again and again. And even though we kind of put a band-aid on things, we got them through their last episode, they were coming back less healthy. They were coming back feeling worse. Their quality of life was declining. And it felt like a revolving door in a lot of ways. And the work that I really wanted to do in medicine, I wanted to do something really meaningful. And I started to experience burnout myself, and I felt like there had to be something more. I also had some of my own health challenges where I became really interested in, after recovering from Lyme disease, basically getting my body back to a level of functioning where I could live the life that I wanted to live. And that conventional medicine kind of didn't give me those answers. So I spent years studying what else is out there. I learned a lot about disease in medical school, but my real interest is how do we create this state of health? And that inspired me to start my practice and to work with some amazing people on creating health, which of course is the best protection against disease and all the things that can happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting because Western medicine is so incredible at certain things and just doesn't cut it when it comes to the chronic disease, or even creating health for that matter.
Absolutely. Yes. And we have increased the lifespan of humans, up to 100 years ago. For most of human history, we lived until age 45. And there's been this explosion in what medicine can do of curing cancer, dealing with chronic disease. We're now alive for these extra 40, 50 years, but we have not done much to help people actually create health and maintain the bodies that they want to live in for those last 40 years. And that's really where my interest lies.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to today's topic of peptides so beautifully because it's funny. I think the word peptides became well known because of GLP-1s. And now those who are taking them, I often hear them use the word peptide as almost like a euphemism for, sharing that they're taking them. But peptides are so much more than just this one piece here. And we're seeing them in headlines and all over social media. But I want to make sure everybody actually fully understands because it is so confusing and there can be so much. So will you explain what peptides really are and what they do in the body?
Absolutely. So peptides, the word itself just means a small chain of amino acids. But we're talking about something very specific when we talk about peptides in this context. And our body makes a number of peptides that are chemical messengers that enhance some kind of pathway in the body. That might be related to body composition. It might be related to inflammation and injury, healing. It might be related to brain health, energy, mood. So there are peptides that govern all sorts of reactions in our bodies. And again, like we alluded to earlier, humans have been on Earth for about 200,000 years. And for most of that time, we've lived till age 45. So those peptides are created in our bodies naturally to an optimal level only until about age 45. And it really starts to decline probably at age 35, 40. And after that, we no longer have the natural support of what our bodies used to make to help us heal, to help us recover, to help us have our metabolism work faster. So peptides as a therapeutic group are, yes, again, you said, they've become popularized because Ozempic was a proof of concept of this can be used and it works. But now we know that there's a number of other peptides that when used strategically, correctly, under the care of somebody who understands them, can make a big positive impact. But of course, we know that there's a lot of caveats and we can go through all that.
Yeah, so I want to go through all of that today. Before we get to the caveats, let's just talk through what some of them are for the different functions. So You mentioned inflammation and healing. And feel free to go into as many specifics as you can give us, because I think it would really help people make sense of everything that's coming at them. So maybe let's start with, like I said, inflammation and recovery.
Yes. So this is a big one. And I think after body composition, this is kind of the next big topic that people are interested in. And I'll start by talking about one specific peptide, which is BPC 157. And I think after the weight loss peptides, that is a common one that people start to hear about because peptides have been used for 20, 30 years by professional athletes and people in Hollywood, but it's kind of been underground. And now it's kind of coming up into the mainstream. And one of the biggest issues that we have is that most peptides are not FDA approved and they have not gone through adequate trials to prove their safety like most other medications. But the one we can start with is BPC 157, and that stands for body protective compound. And that was isolated from our stomach at one point, where researchers found that we produce this peptide and it protects the stomach wall from ulcers. And if you are forming an ulcer and you get a little bit more of this BPC, then you heal faster. So the BPC was extracted from the stomach, and then trials were done with injections in animals, and it was found that it could also heal other injuries, especially tendon injuries. The Achilles tendon was a big one that was studied, where the BPC 157 basically recruits all the healing cells to the site of an injury in order for that injury to heal. And this is a big deal because if anyone's dealt with injuries in conventional medicine, we have a few options. We have take a whole bunch of ibuprofen and Tylenol, do physical therapy, which is powerful and can definitely rehab the body, or surgery. So there's really no therapeutic that enhances the body's ability to heal. And I think that's where peptides like this are really exciting. And the BPC 157 also can heal the GI tract and improve circulation to other parts of the body. There are not that many human trials, which I mentioned before, which has to be considered when you're thinking about this. But I think it's really promising and something that we just don't have in medicine elsewhere.
Yeah, it makes me think too, as you mentioned, sort of the gut and that healing, an ulcer, whatever. It also makes me think that this would be supportive for autoimmune.
Yes, absolutely. So the BBC 157, and there's a few other peptides that are very supportive for people who are dealing with autoimmune conditions. It can balance the immune system from this sort of overdrive where that happens in autoimmunity and help the body recognize self versus non-self. So there's been an explosion in autoimmune conditions in the last 20, 30 years. And I think it's fairly definitively known now that that's because we live in a chemical soup. We are exposed to chemicals, which again, over this very long period of time of human evolution, we were never exposed. Our food came from the earth and from animals, and we were not exposed to these non-food chemicals. And now the immune system is easily confused between, is this healthy tissue or is this a foreign invader? And we can get autoimmune disease, with the thyroid being most common, and inflammation, and peptides like BPC 157, also something called KPV and thymosin alpha 1 can be very powerful immune regulators and help bring that immune system back into balance.
Yeah, I love that you talked about the word regulators because I think so often with pharmaceuticals, it's pushing things in one direction or the other. We talk about it a lot with adaptogenic herbs where we can bring things back into balance. And so if we're all hearing you correctly, some of these peptides can modulate or regulate and bring things back into balance versus artificially pushing in one direction or the other.
That's a great point. And that is the main difference, I think, between medications and peptides. So medications either force a pathway on or block that pathway. Medications are broken down to their metabolites that have to be filtered by the liver or the kidneys and gotten rid of in the body. Peptides are like the first domino in a set of dominoes where basically you tip that domino and it enhances something that's already happening in your body. And rather than needing to be broken down by the liver or kidneys, it is just broken down to those amino acids as if you had just eaten a piece of chicken and it leaves your body. And I don't want to make the impression that this makes them 100% safe all the time, because I think there is some nuance there. But as a mechanism, they certainly work with your body far more than a lot of drugs and medications that are available.
I think it's a really interesting piece there, too, to then think about if that's how they function, then thinking about brain peptides, because when we think about, anxiety, depression, stress, neuroinflammation, what are some of the peptides that might be interesting there?
Great question. I think this is one of the most interesting areas that we're now investigating when it comes to peptides. And you mentioned neuroinflammation. So, most of the older research and most of the hypotheses around anxiety, depression, ADHD has been about neurotransmitter imbalances. Sometimes we don't realize that really was a hypothesis, that no one went into the brain and said depressed people don't have enough serotonin. And so we have all these drugs that modulate our serotonin, our dopamine, other neurotransmitters. And most of the recent research that we're seeing when it comes to cognitive decline, anxiety, depression is really related to neuroinflammation and a brain that's on fire. So some of my favorite peptides when it comes to brain health are Selank and Semax and something called Panelium. So Selank and Semax were developed in Russia for their cosmonaut and military programs where people needed to stay focused and calm in austere environments for a long period of time. And these peptides, again, reduce that neuroinflammation, that fire in the brain, but also Selank in particular improves calm and our GABA neurotransmitter production. And it improves focus at the same time, which again is so rare in usual pharmacology. Most of the things that are going to reduce anxiety will make you sleepy and foggy. And anything that's going to increase focus is going to potentially raise anxiety in those people who are prone to that sort of things. And I think there's long-lasting effects. Usually in people who are struggling with anxiety, I'll do about a 3-month cycle. And depending on the degree of struggles that people are having, some people are able to do that once a year and they do fantastic and they don't need it again. Some people need to return to it in 6 months, but there seems to be some cellular cleanup there that's more effective than taking a drug on a daily basis that stops working when you stop taking it.
I'm still stuck on what you said before, that the serotonin was a hypothesis. And all of these SSRI medications are all based on this hypothesis without actually ever looking into it.
Right.
I'm
And
sorry,
I
I'm
think it's
having a
because
moment.
yeah, I know. It's crazy. And I think it's because it's hard to measure how much serotonin
Sure.
someone is actually producing. But yeah, it's all based on this hypothesis that, like, if you're depressed, you might not have enough. So let's give you more. And we know that there's so many people that don't respond to SSRIs or traditional medications for depression and anxiety. And we don't necessarily look for the root cause, which sometimes is that neuroinflammation.
Yeah, for sure. And then as we think about longevity, there are certainly peptides as far, mitochondrial function. So I guess maybe let's also take a step back because not every one of our listeners understands what we even mean by mitochondrial function. So can you talk about that and then why somebody might look into peptides for that function?
Absolutely. So the mitochondria are the energy centers of the cell. Mitochondria produce the energy that we need for daily living in the form of molecules called ATP. And basically, most of our metabolic processes, in terms of what we eat, how the body processes it, the end result, what we're trying to get to is the production of those units of energy so that we can fuel our bodies and our brains. And, fatigue and brain fog and all those symptoms, those types of symptoms can be a form of mitochondrial failure. And again, just because of our chemical exposures, the ability for our mitochondria to produce clean energy really declines as we get older. That's also influenced by hormonal changes, just the wear and tear on our bodies. So there are a few peptides that can clean up a little bit of how the mitochondria work, which I think those are some really meaningful tools. I work with a lot of both men and women in middle age, and but especially women in hormonal transitions. We know that those can be quite destabilizing, and mitochondria are really highly concentrated in the muscles and the brain, and improving mitochondrial function can really uplevel someone's level of functioning.
And so for the peptides for mitochondrial function, how much overlap is there with the peptides for body composition?
A little bit. So, one in particular that I like to use is something called MOTS-c, and that one does improve insulin sensitivity. So, your listeners may already know, but the insulin is the central hormone when it comes to what happens to food after you put it in your mouth. Will this be stored as fat or will this be used as energy? People who are insulin resistant, which means that the body doesn't listen very well to insulin. The insulin keeps knocking on the door and the body's ignoring it, pretending it's not home. The body starts overproducing insulin, and insulin is a fat storage hormone. So whenever you're flooded with insulin, your body will store fat, even with good habits. So MOTS-c is cool because it's an insulin sensitizer. And as you become more insulin sensitive, then you basically have more metabolic flexibility and your body can actually use food as fuel rather than store it as fat. So I sometimes use this to transition people off the GLP-1s. And that's a whole battle in itself. But there are some peptides which are fantastic tools for getting people off those drugs so that they don't have to stay on them long term.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that you just used the word tool. And so I think that's worth emphasizing because when you and I spoke about all this before, you say they're a tool versus a lot of people think that they're, maybe a magic bullet or the thing that's going to push them over the edge to get to whatever it is. So tell us more about what you mean by using them as a tool.
Right. So if you are not willing to build some basic habits to support your health, peptides are a waste of money. We can kind of be clear about that, where peptides can support the body. Some peptides make healthy habits easier because, and I think it's, a lot of times we go into this thinking, if you're not already willing to do what you're supposed to do, the peptides won't help. There are some people that I work with who come to me who are at such a level of burnout and they want to do those things. They want to exercise, they want to make good food choices, but their energy is just bottomed out and the cravings are really intense. And sometimes we use peptides as a tool to make good choices easier. But the whole thing is that peptides will support what you're willing to do. So making those choices easier, they may make habits easier, but the lifestyle is the foundation. If you are willing to care for your body by putting healthy foods, by putting nutrients into your body, care for your body by building muscle, which is really the currency of health, then peptides can be an additive tool to basically allow your body to get more out of those healthy habits.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, I do so much with supplements in my practice, and I always say, we can't supplement our way out of poor lifestyle choices. And I think because we see peptides as so much more powerful, that I think there's the perception that it can take the place of. And so I appreciate that you're saying this is not a replacement. This is an additive tool. So I want to double click on some of the things that you've already briefly mentioned in terms of caveats and nuance and, who is the best fit for this? At what point do we want to add peptides or say, wait a minute, this isn't the best approach for me? So we'll get to all of that after we highlight our partner for this episode. My book, Uncomplicating Wellness, was released in October of 2025, and I want to share something that a reader wrote that literally stopped me in my tracks. It says, I can literally say Jenn saved my life. I went from an A1C of over 11 to 6.1 with her guidance, techniques, and motivations. Friends, it is certainly not perfection. It's really about understanding how the body works and making steady, sustainable shifts that compound over time. So, Uncomplicating Wellness, the book, isn't extreme. It's also not a reset or a detox. It is clear, practical recommendations rooted in science and in real life so that we can make impactful changes that stick with us. So if you're ready to feel informed rather than intimidated and empowered rather than overwhelmed, text the word book, BOOK, to 833-801-0500. Again, text the word book to 833-801-0500. Okay, Aleksandra, so we've shared a bunch of peptides that people might be curious about. And you've also mentioned that there's nuance to this whole conversation and they're maybe not a fit for everyone. And we started with this idea that if we're not willing to make some lifestyle choices, there's only so much that peptides can do. Who are some of the people or what are some of the circumstances where you would say peptides are not a fit or where they might be contraindicated?
Sure. I think first, I just want to say that this is very much an emerging therapy, and the way we source peptides is really important. So
Thank you.
there
This is
are
on my
a
list.
number, yes, and I
Yeah.
thought I would just start with that because I think that there are some peptides that no one should be using, and there is a lot of FDA oversight to our drug supply, mostly because it's necessary. And if we're putting something that into our bodies that changes our biochemistry, we need to make sure that that's doing what we think it's doing. So peptides have truly exploded. And when they are produced in a lab, they naturally will have something called endotoxins in them. And the process of cleaning those out is an extra step that a compounding pharmacy will do and potentially some really good labs will do. But that step is skipped in a lot of Chinese peptides and a lot of peptides that are coming from overseas. And if you inject a peptide with endotoxins in it, it can trigger lifelong inflammation and cause incredible issues in the body. So if you go on the internet, everybody's trying to sell peptides, and it doesn't mean all those peptides are safe. So I think that's the first disclaimer, is that they have to come from a trusted source. I try to source all our peptides from a compounding pharmacy. Those laws are a moving target and they are changing constantly. Right now, we are lucky to be in a place where we can get most of our peptides from a compounding pharmacy and very few from a lab on which we do independent testing on endotoxicity, sterility, purity. But it's a dangerous world out there. So I just want to throw that out there first.
Yes, because I hear a lot about, things coming from different countries, which have different regulations as far as what's allowed to be in there or all these things. So I love that you're also sharing questions that we can ask, and to ensure that what we're getting is a quality peptide.
Absolutely. Yes. And, to build on top of that, who should not take peptides? I think the most important, of course, pregnant women should not take peptides. That is a time
And
in your
those
life
trying
when
to
you're,
conceive, would you say too?
yes. And those trying to conceive, that is a very gentle, precarious time in your body. And we need things to be the way they're supposed to be. So, and then the other big group is for anyone who has active cancer. There are some peptides that can be supportive, but a lot of peptides, especially the more popular ones like growth hormone promoting peptides and BPC 157, can make an existing cancer worse. Growth hormone will stimulate any abnormal or rapidly replicating tissue to grow. And something like BPC 157 can grow new blood supply to injured tissue, which is great when you're dealing with a tendon injury, not so great when you're dealing with cancer or tumor. So I think that most people should be working with a physician if you're going to do peptides. And I make sure that all my women are up to date on their mammograms, their pap smears, that we review your family history, make sure you don't have a high genetic risk of cancer, because this is always a risk benefit ratio. So I want to use peptides in those men and women who are going to experience more benefits than there are risks. So, and for some people who have cancer or have a high genetic risk, the risk for some peptides just outweighs any sort of benefit. So I think that's kind of the biggest one. We have to be more careful in diabetics with certain things. And again, I think this is something that is powerful. It's more powerful than supplements, and it will change your biochemistry. So working with somebody who can understand what meds you're on, what your medical history has been, I think is the safest way to go. And one other, I think this is more of a fine point, and for women in hormonal transitions, so women in perimenopause, menopause, even women with PCOS, estrogen dominant, younger women who have hormonal abnormalities, peptides don't work so well if we don't take care of those first. So I generally want to be working on a foundation of fairly healthy hormones. There are some women who can't take hormones or can't optimize their hormones for certain reasons, and sometimes we use peptides to manage that. But I like to do labs. I want to make sure that you are getting enough micronutrients. And we talked already about diet and all those things. The ideal patient for me is someone who has been working on their metabolic health, not necessarily is 100% there at the perfect weight or whatever, but has been working towards it, has been making efforts to balance their hormones. And then it's just sort of icing on the cake, and we can make things just a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that you pointed that out because this was also my next question in terms of what are you looking for to say this is the person where peptides are, a fantastic next step. And then within that, we're asking a ton of more questions and that kind of stuff. So from what you've shared, I hesitate to use the word optimize because I think that means something different for so many people. But like 80-20, 90-10, like what does it look like for you to say this person is doing the steps that would then benefit from the peptides?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's so individual, and unless I sit with you, I think there's always something to support, and whether during our first visit, there are some people I meet with, and I just say, "We're not gonna talk about peptides during this visit because 'cause we're not ready for that. But let's take some steps towards healing your body and optimizing in a different way." And I think that different people also have a different burden of genetic predisposition to, being overweight or obese or inflammation or other things people have. So I never want to put it on somebody to say, you're not doing enough. We're not going to do this for you. I think we're just building a foundation of how can we get you a little bit healthier so that this will really work. And unlike medications, we cycle peptides. So they're not used long term. We use them usually for a few months, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, and then we come off of them. And so they're an investment. So I want your body to be in a place where you can really use it. And one of the important things is that I want you to be able to exercise, strength train, usually when you're doing these things, to make good food choices. So if life is in such a stage where that's not a priority or an option, it may not be a good time to use peptides.
Yeah, and the other thing that you just brought up there is this idea of cycling. Because one of the things I was going to ask you about is, even when we talk about supplementing with like melatonin is a good example, right? Where we're supplementing with something, we often want to cycle it so that our body doesn't stop producing it on its own. And so you're saying the same thing here with the peptides, which I think is really important. And the other question that comes up to me with that is we talked about sourcing already, but even dosing, and one of the things that you said last time we spoke is that even with GLP-1s, at a certain dose, they're no longer acting as a peptide. So can you speak to dosing a little bit in some of this?
Yes. And again, for me, it's always the lowest effective dose. I want your body to get that right stimulus to start moving in the right direction without being overwhelmed or stressed. I think that everything we do, we're trying to find that perfect dose. Like if you ate all protein all day and you had 300 grams, that's too much. That's going to go overboard and you will just be constipated and have kidney stones. But if you're at 120 grams and you're exercising and active, that's fantastic. So I think it's that Goldilocks effect. And again, it might be a little different in different people. People do respond quite differently. And I mentioned that sometimes I will do labs to have a better understanding of where people might have a stronger response. But I think the GLP-1s, which we aren't talking much about in this episode, but that's where I think I am a huge fan of microdoses. I think that at microdoses, we can get those anti-inflammatory benefits. We're not losing muscle if we're doing the other things we need to do. And we can support some healthy body recomposition. And, that's kind of, I even shy away from the word weight loss because I don't
Thank you.
care about weight loss. I don't care about your mass, I care about how much muscle and how much adipose or fat tissue you have, because we know that fat tissue is inflammatory and harmful, whereas muscle is really healthy and protective. So yes, we want to have that Goldilocks dose, whatever we're doing, to basically support your body in healing and getting to equilibrium.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, because with you 1,000% on it. And so I suppose another piece that I hope people are taking away from this is also, given your expertise and everything you're sharing, questions that they can then take to their practitioner to assess if the person they're working with is knowledgeable and hands-on and doing the things to ensure, not just the efficacy, but the safety in working with these relatively experimental substances.
Yes, absolutely.
And final thought, something to wrap this up, or anything we didn't talk about that you're like, we must address this?
I think, again, this is such an exciting area of health. And I think that I do want to empower people in the sense that we deserve to feel good in all the stages of our lives. And I think medicine has kind of lost sight of that, where when I went through my conventional training, most of what I was taught was if someone complains of fatigue, brain fog, or poor sleep, you give them reassurance. This is a normal part of aging. This is what it's like. But I think we are in an era where we can give more than reassurance. And there's a way to live in the bodies that make us feel like the best versions of ourselves, where we can really enjoy all the decades of our lives. So, I think that the habits that you talk about are so critical and so foundational. And really, those habits are going to go further than most of the supplements and peptides and all the other things that we talk about. But we do have some pretty cool tools for bodies that have been through a lot of stress, for bodies that have experienced inflammation, bodies that have experienced trauma, to get you back into equilibrium so that you can heal and make those good habits work for you.
I love it. Awesome. All right, it's time for a rapid fire off topic questions. Are you ready?
I guess so.
No pressure. All right, what's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health this week? Like the salad and fries, if you will.
Okay, all right. Best thing I've done. Okay, it's Thursday. Hot yoga is probably the best thing I've done for my health. That's a weekly wonderful thing. What's the worst thing that I've done for my health this week? I would say some days of inconsistent meals.
I hear you. Life, right?
Life.
Life happens.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
All right. Yeah. If you weren't a doctor and founder of the Gajer practice, what would you do?
Oh, good question. I think something like completely different. I feel like even though I have no skill set in this area, if this was like a blank slate and I could be whatever I wanted to, I would do something related to like art or music or film
Oh, love that.
and just be super creative. Yeah.
Fun. All right. Your favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise, or you could give us a fiction book.
Okay. I think my favorite fiction book, which in recent years I've gotten back into reading fiction, and it's definitely one of my favorite hobbies, but The Covenant of Water spans multiple generations of this family. It's a saga. A small disclaimer, it's written by a physician. There's always physician characters in this writer's books, but just such a beautifully written book of just life and how it unfolds.
Nice. If you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
Cancer.
If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
Teleportation. I want to
Me
be
too.
I want to be able to go between places really quickly.
Yes. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve. Oh, can I skip? Can I skip this one?
All right, last one. In your opinion, what's the next frontier in wellness?
First of all, I think the foundations are foundational, and I think there's more and more people who care about cleaning up our food a little bit so that good choices aren't astronomically difficult. So I think the foundation being foundational. But the other thing that I think is really cool is exosome stem cells. There's some really cool stuff coming that I think will be able to renew the way our bodies are working and help us feel healthier through all the decades of our lives.
I love it. Well, Dr. Aleksandra Gajer, thank you so much for being here, for explaining all of these in a way that I hope it's really tangible and actionable for people. So tell everybody how to connect with you, where to learn more, and potentially come see you.
Yeah. So online, we are at thegayapractice.com, and it's Gajer, and that's our website. On there, there's a button for a free introductory call. I think that's the best way to kind of get in touch with us. We can give you an honest opinion whether it'd be worth it to have a visit with us, what kind of things we can help with, what we can't. We can see people throughout the country on telemedicine. And we're also on Instagram at the Gajer Practice, and you can see more there.
Excellent. Yes, we'll put links to everything in the episode notes for everybody. Just thank you again. Appreciate your time and expertise.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, friends. On Friday in this week's bite-sized bonus episode, we're talking about tears. So has anyone ever said, or maybe you said, I need a good cry? Or maybe you're watching like that tearjerker of a movie and then you felt better? There is a reason for that. And then what about tears of joy? Does that matter? So we're going to talk about all of it on Friday in this week's bite-sized bonus episode. So be sure wherever you're listening, click the plus sign or the follow button, and then your app will alert you when it goes live on Friday. Well, as always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENN-TREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Pick your platform, send a message. I love hearing from you, your ideas, your takeaways, your questions. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your coach. Dr. Aleksandra Gajer, thank you again one more time for joining us this week.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And friends, if you're not already, join us in the Happy Healthy Hub. You'll go to asaladwithasideofries.com/membership. This shows your support for this podcast, this community, and above all, your health. You'll get this week's episode in full video with some behind the scenes pieces, your 24/7 Ask Me Anything on the community board, and this week's recipe for grilled steak salad with corn, cucumbers, and sweet onion dressing. So until next week, remember, peptides are natural chemical messengers that signal specific cellular functions, which can be a tool once we're optimized. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.